Good morning, everybody. Hope you're feeling fine. Hi, Colin. Lovely to see you. So we'll get it underway, but please come in and join us. We haven't started yet. You're not late. We're starting now. So I'm Marewa Glover. I'm from New Zealand. I've been doing tobacco control for 31 years. Got to keep adding them, which is a good thing, really, then, because I'm still alive. So this is a workshop in the real sense of a workshop. We're going to put you to work. We're not going to sit here and talk to you. We're just going to introduce ourselves, and then I'll explain what these groups are, and that you may move to a group that is of more interest to you. So what else about me? Behavioural scientist. I am an Indigenous person of New Zealand, but I also have Irish and English background, so, you know, I acknowledge all those different sides. And I will introduce my co-facilitators. So as co-facilitators, they're going to just help. We're going to come around and make sure that you're all progressing with the task and not talking about what you did last night. And I think that Sud is also going to come and help us because we have quite a lot of groups here. I'd like to introduce Karen from my team back in New Zealand. She'll be also popping around to make sure you have everything you need. What happened to my husband? Is he lost again? Ah, all right. And Steve, my partner and in business and life, is also here to help everything run smoothly. So can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Tomás from Probapeo, Mexico, and a consumer. And I am very honored to be here with you and participating in this workshop.
Hi, I'm Judy Gibson from INCO, which is a consumer organisation, a global international one, which I think you probably all know. So that's probably enough from me, except to say welcome, and I'm so pleased you're all here. Thank you.
Okay, so I hope that you have looked at my global, my GFN 5ers, little 5-minute videos. So in 21, we did one on the barriers to quitting or switching that we found among, we have a longitudinal study, very in-depth. There you are, Sud. Yep, great, thank you. Longitudinal study, in-depth, qualitative. We do phone interviews. We started with 62 people, and we're following them through. We're up to our 23 GFN 5 are reporting barriers to switching or quitting at 2 years. We've now got 2 years of data from them. The 2022 GFN 5 we looked at the facilitators of quitting or switching. So what we want to do today is hear from you about barriers to switching to a harm-reduced product. It could be heat not burn or vaping, whatever you have in your country, and the barriers that are stopping people from, I think we'll focus on switching, but you can talk about quitting, it's similar, right? The barriers to switching, we have, that's the sheet that's on those, what are they called?
Sheets.
Yeah, the sheets, there's one, the barriers one is up, and then we have the facilitators. So first, if you will brainstorm in groups, the barriers, to whatever group you're, and we'll do that in a minute. Then we will get some feedback from you all about the barriers. Then the next one will be look at the facilitators. What have helped people to switch? And what's facilitating that transition or change? Again, for the group that you are in and focused on. Now, groups. As people were coming in, I've been asking what you're interested in. This one here, could you put your hand up? That one there is focused on the barriers to switching for people with low income. This group over here, hola, hola. This group over here are focusing on the barriers to switching in South America. Multiple issues there. Low income, language, non-English speaking countries. So they're focusing on South America. It will touch on low income. It will touch on non-English speaking. We have... Do we have another one sorted out? Because really what the other groups will be depends on you and what your interests are. I would really like to see a group focused on the barriers to switching for people with mental health conditions. So is anyone interested in that? Yes? So, okay, this is the group here that will focus on the barriers to switching or quitting for people with mental health conditions. Over here, do we have any more people interested in countries that really are more heavy on the heat not burn? Korea, Japan, if there's anyone else interested in that? What other interests are there? Is there a group that wants to focus on countries that have regulated, and that's the focus, or are going towards prohibition? So Australia. A group that...
Does it have to be specific with each group?
Does it have to be a specific focus?
No, I mean, does it have to be this? I didn't hear it until the end. This group was about people with...
The barriers to switching for people with mental health conditions, because that's common across the world, perhaps. Or you can have like a region. There could be a region.
People with major health problems.
Mental.
Major.
Mental health. It could be anything. It just could be anxiety, but
This part of
ADHD.
Comorbidities that might work for you, the comorbidity group. Why don't we do a comorbidity group? So those are people that are obviously seeing the doctor a lot and would be relying on, Okay, so that group over there is looking at comorbidity, if you want, yes? Have we got enough people that want to form a group around people with weight, excess adiposity? Yeah, I mean, it could be the same comorbidity group, people with comorbidities, I think over there, right? Comorbidities and multiple health conditions. They're coming into contact with the health professionals all the time, so that will be that group over there. Any other interests? Young people? Yes?
We'll look at services like barriers to quitting and services to enable or say what are the things that might enable or support that within the country.
Yep, so, all right, let me explain this sheet. So we've done a just to make it kind of easier, we have the sheets already with some categories on them. So with our Voices of the 5% study and the analysis we did of the barriers, we came up with 4 Ds. That makes it easy for people to remember. So we have, I can't see them. Sorry, these boards are blocking. So the 4 Ds are distance. It's just too far away from smoking. It's too foreign. And it's too different from what they currently do. So anything in that kind of nature, you can just write it in distance. Doubt. It's as harmful as smoking. I don't know. That people are saying that it's dangerous. So they have doubt about it, so they'd rather not do it. Difficulty, the device. It's got too many buttons, I don't know how to use it, there's so many of them. I'm coughing, so anything about the difficulty of switching. And the other one is diluted. So it's too weak, it doesn't work, I don't like it, I prefer smoking, there's no hit, It's diluted. It's like you're a meat eater and it's like tofu. So, and then there's room for other barriers, and there's room for just notes, which is what you were saying, where have you gone, about potential ways to overcome these barriers. The Facilitators one has a similar framework on it. So we have the 4Ds. Now, when we're talking about facilitators, why do I have the 4D, the barriers? It's because in our 2023 GFN Fiver, what facilitates people switching is overcoming those barriers, is doing away with those barriers. So someone might say, I went to a vape shop and they were really useful and they showed me how to use the device. That's overcoming difficulty. So that's why the 4Ds are there. And then we have a section, this section on the side is benefits. It was a huge category in the people that had switched, the benefits of switching. And then there's a space for other. So we just haven't worked out, there were some groups. Do you want to move around now? Or any more ideas for forming a group? Barriers and switching for people with comorbidities over there. Low income people here. South America over there. And what was your suggestion? You want one? Barriers for people who are interested in quitting and
how about the real universal one? Women and smokeless, nicotine pouches, snus, moist snuff. It's used 5 times more by men than females.
So do we have enough interest in having a group focused on barriers to switching for women in the world? Women. Sorry? Women? Great. There's that group down the back is going to focus on the barriers for women and facilitators. Age? Older age? Or just age generally? Okay. So we'll have, did you have a topic here? Mental health. This was for people for mental health conditions. People with comorbidity issues over there, including weight, including other addictions, including multiple health. They're coming into contact with the health system all the time, so there's particular barriers they're going to face. So that's that one over there. And haven't got any down the back there. We haven't got many here for Japan, Korea, countries where the main product is heat not burn, if there's anyone else here. You were doing low income. What are you interested in over here? What would you like to focus on? Journalists. The barriers to switching for journalists. So you might want to come and join a group. And you're doing women, okay? And so then we have another group over here. What would you like to focus on? What would you like to focus on? Bernd? Do you have a topic? Asia, you want to go to Asia, the Asia group? Yep. What about you? You're another journalist. Yeah. Okay, good. Raluca, what group would you like to join? Okay. So we don't have one there. All right, have we moved around? Sorry, Asia. All right. So if you're all clear, if you could start, you need somebody to write on the board. You need someone to write on the board. You'll need someone to feed back when we hear from the different groups. So you need someone to write, and you can start. So what we'd like now is just to hear back. You don't have to read everything because there's so many of you, and we've still got another focus, another piece of paper. So,
Is it on?
how are you going, Sud? Down there, are you guys ready?
Are you guys ready to report back? Yep.
All right. Okay, everybody, we just want to hear back from each group, a general, what's interesting is, are the barriers the same? Are there differences? How is it varying across these different groups? So if we could have someone from each group who's going to feed back, and right, might have to get Steve to come up and... I know, yeah. People are still talking. I'm trying to get their attention. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Are we ready? So would you guys like to talk first about... Okay, everybody, could we have your attention? And we're going to hear back from our Japan, Korea, Asia group, where they have heat not burn as sort of more the primary product. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can we focus over here, please, and hear the feedback?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, good morning. We are from the Asia group. We have only 4 people with us today. So our group has been given the task of covering Asia. So we talk about Japan, some of the Southeast Asia, things like Indonesia, Singapore, and Malaysia, where I come from. And we're covering again the domains that has been entrusted to us. So if I go one by one, Maria, is that right? Yeah? Yeah, all right, okay. How many minutes am I given?
Just a brief,
Okay, briefly, yeah. So some of the issues that we have to switch, basically from conventional cigarettes to reduced risk products would include things like distance. In some of the areas that we cover, looking at Indonesia, some of the archipelago, and also in Malaysia as well, I assume things like Japan as well, there's going to be areas which are impacted by distance, geographical distance. Example, in East Malaysia or Borneo, there's a lot of mountains in areas, so not only vaping assessed, but also healthcare is a bit reduced in some of these areas. So vaping is quite uncommon in certain countries because of this distance, maybe. Of course, there's certain policies probably in place by the industries player and so on. But geographical distance is definitely in, because not only to access the tool, but also to access information. And this can be seen as well in some of the doubts area or domains, where the information scarcity is there. A lot of informations are sometimes misinformed. Example, our healthcare providers, even in certain countries, would say that, vaping is even worse than conventional cigarettes. And this is especially impacted by the regulation as well. And a lot of countries are also impacted, in Southeast Asia, are impacted by the black market. So we have a lot of misinformation that occurs because of this. So it doesn't not only come in the form of media coverage, but also from the healthcare professional. And this is very worrisome when your own doctor could not make the differentiation between reduced risk products and against cigarettes. They say that even vape is even worse than cigarettes, things like that. So some of the other difficulties would be, there's too much mixed information. If you go to, let's say, a vaping store, especially a vaping store which is not legalized or so-called not registered with the government. In some of the countries, we have vape stores, or these would be more of the illegal vapors or sellers or vendors, and there's no registration yet in some countries. So the products are too many different concentrations. Some of the labeling are also incorrect. They don't have the proper concentrations. So when they give advice when these vendors or sellers give advice to the population or whoever is purchasing them, they are giving wrong advice, and they are not able to actually educate what are the proper strength that the person are going to take for the first time, and so on. So this leads to the improper instruction, and also untrained sellers or vendors which are probably, underground or selling inappropriately to young school children and so forth, which leads to the problems of young vapers, which happens a lot in our countries where the enforcement might be reduced. Our policing is not so strong compared with other countries. There have to be more investment into enforcement and regulations into these countries, including Southeast Asia countries such as my countries as well. And the regulations, of course, are not uniform, and we cannot blame the countries. Of course, the regulations are not uniform because different countries will have different priorities. But example would be Malaysia and Singapore, how Malaysia, where the vape is basically all over the place, there's no proper regulations yet. Singapore is very strict on that. And Singapore is, some of the Singaporeans are accessing vape through Malaysia, and basically they come in as illegal vapes, which are then sold in Singapore. So these are some of the issues. So how do you overcome that? Again, it is not one problem that can be solved. Of course, you need some sort of regulations and governance by each country in Asia. And the tax must be risk proportionate. Now, this is an issue because in certain countries, the tax might be reduced or very low, or in certain countries, because of the how people perceive vape, so they would actually increase the tax, and this happens in Malaysia as well. We need people who are trained, especially the medical professionals, or not necessarily doctors, but if you go into selling vape, especially vendors and retailers, they need to be so-called some sort of basic education on how that they should relay the information to the buyers or to the population, and there must be responsible media practice. Of course, it has to cover the healthcare professional, because this would be the biggest opponent in reduced risk product in Southeast Asia as well. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much. Great job. Next group, we have low income. Is that right? Excellent.
Hi. For the low income areas, I mean, first of all, things we noted were that people on low income are not necessarily smoking factories-made cigarettes. They're often smoking rolling tobacco or illicit tobacco. And they're suffering quite often stresses and pressures, which basically mean that quitting smoking is not high on their priority list. There's a wonderful phrase from Sam here about intersectionality in the fact that also people on low income are probably facing mental health problems, or they're in marginalized groups. So there's a lot of there's a lot of influence of some of the other things that are being said in the room that particularly affect people on low income. In terms of the sort of 4Ds and other barriers, big ones are just lack of availability. There's less access to online, and often in retail environments or the other environments where they purchase product, the types of products that give them alternatives, credible alternatives, are just not available. The industry is very much focused on the premium end because they need to make a profit, the products need to be sustainable, and there aren't enough products that are affordable for people on low incomes. Device-delivered nicotine requires maintenance. It's not just buying the device, it's maintaining the device. And if you don't maintain the device, the experience is poor or becomes poor, and people become disenchanted and go back to cigarettes. There's a lot of peer pressure amongst these groups. There's a feeling of amongst lower income groups that these sort of products are not for them, they're for other sorts of people. There's a community of smokers, and sometimes, I think Charlie mentioned that, you know, when life is tough, the cigarette is the only pleasure left, and you don't want to give it up. There are more important things in these people's lives than quitting. Their health concerns are on a day-to-day basis, not on a long-term basis. When we come back to the Ds, in terms of doubt and difficulty, information access is hard. Often, you know, information is from tabloid press or from unreliable sources, and there's a lack of trust and access of health professionals that might be able to give them reliable advice. In terms of difficulty, the cost of devices is prohibitive, and the availability is restricted. And I think a thing I mentioned before, cigarettes and use of cigarettes reinforces identity in some of these groups, and identity becomes, again, very important for people on low income and in low socioeconomic groups. In terms of the dilution, basically the products that are currently available are still not as good as cigarettes in terms of delivering nicotine at a rate that's controlled by the consumer. So you can't puff harder or softer on a snus. You can't. A lot of vaping devices will give you a smooth delivery of nicotine, but you don't have the same flexibility that people do with cigarettes. When they use a cigarette, they can puff lightly on it, they can puff heavily on it, they can deliver the amount of nicotine they need for their situation. And cheap products do not deliver the same sensory experience. And only some of the more sophisticated products come close to delivering the sensory experience of a cigarette. And cheap products are just frankly inferior. So there's huge barriers, and quite honestly, they seem to be a group that is only now being looked at because as I said, manufacturers need to make a profit, and there's no money in selling cheap products to low-income people. It doesn't become sustainable, and governments and regulators seem unwilling to fill in the gap.
Excellent.
Is there anything I missed, guys, or is that?
Excellent. Thank you very much. Next group. Who's really to Colin? Oh, microphone. Here's the microphone. So Colin, and then we'll come to America.
So we're looking at people with mental illness. So I think what you said was very similar to our group, really. We didn't find much in the way of area of distance. In terms of doubt, we recognise that people with mental illness typically rely on cigarettes for relief of their symptoms and to help them to cope. And So giving up smoking is a big concern for many of them. And you mentioned also pleasure, and it often is the only thing that they, their one last pleasure which they enjoy, so they're reluctant to give that up. But it does help them to cope, and that's just coping is obviously the first priority for many people. But the main things we looked at were difficulty. So for people with mental illness and who typically use other substances, there's a fear of their mental illness deteriorating if they quit smoking because they often self-medicate with nicotine. There's a fear of relapse if you're using another substance. People worry that if they give up their cigarettes, they will relapse, which of course is not true, but that's what they're worried about. There's a lot of misinformation in this group. They don't have access to the same resources, so they don't know as much about these things as other people. We've got stigma here. I'm not sure quite why we decided on stigma, but I'm sure there's a very good reason. And there is the issue of these people being heavily dependent. Well, that comes more under dilution. They tend to be heavier smokers. They're more heavily dependent, so they're less likely to be able to quit, and they may well feel that vaping or whatever it is, some other alternative, won't be strong enough to help them. If you've got mental illness and you're just struggling to cope, you may not see cigarettes as a priority. It's probably way down the list. Even though you're more likely to die from that than from your illness, it's often way down the list, so it isn't going to get urgent attention. It's harder to get support if you have mental illness. You don't have the same network. You may not have the same access to service providers or know how to access them. So it's harder to access these services. Your peers tend to smoke as well, and there's a whole social aspect that you belong to that smoking group. There's the cost issue. Often it's more expensive to get started on vaping, which is a problem for people with fixed incomes. And there are often cognitive issues as well, which interfere with their ability to research and explore the options available. And stress, of course, will undermine their ability to achieve those change their goal, achieve that goal. And that one I covered. So that's all we have, I think. Sorry? Homeless and in prison? Oh, sorry? Yes, so another group that we mentioned is the homeless people and in prison who have less access and have more difficulties using these products. Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much. Just going over to Latin America now. We'll come to you next, Sud.
Okay, we are the LATAM group in Spanish. No, I will do it in English. We are the LATAM group, or as I call it, the Wild West. And why is that? Because in LATAM, most of the countries, they have either a prohibition or a lack of regulation for these alternatives, which is the worst scenario we could ever have. Smokers in Latin America, they have only two choices, quit or die. And the harm reduction concept is not accepted at all. So, going back to the exercise, what did we find as distance? First of all, technical barriers and age barriers. Those who are younger, they might be more used to new technology. They are more willing to accept and to change to new technology, but what happens with people who is older, from my generation and up? The cost. Latin America, most of the countries, they are really poor. People do not afford to buy the goods, so the cost of devices and also considering that they are not legally available is also a huge barrier for us in Latin America. And prohibitions and lack of regulations, which, as I said before, is the worst scenario we could ever have, and that is what really puts at risk the population that lives in Latin America who is willing to switch to a better alternative. Regarding doubts, there is a lot of misinformation. In Latin America, most of these alternatives are considered even worse than smoking, which is totally wrong. The media terrorism, we all know what has happened with EVALI, and the EVALI issue in Latin America was huge as many false cases of EVALI started to appear, and the same patient with EVALI was hospitalized 2, 3, or 5 times, and he was discharged 5 times, the same patient from the hospital. So there's a lot of misinformation and media terrorism regarding that. Wrong medical advice. The medical and scientific community is not aware of the alternatives, is not aware of the science behind these alternatives, is not aware of the concept of harm reduction, and it's not accepted. Many times I hear when I talk to medical colleagues, primum non nocere, first do not harm. And what is to cause harm? For me, the harm is to let somebody who smokes without any other option rather than to keep smoking. That's the real harm. Well, the medical community inertia, they are not willing to accept new concepts. Lack of courage and lack of information of the political class. There's a huge misinformation amongst the political class, amongst the congressmen, the parliament, ministers of health, and they all consider that non-combustible alternatives are as harmful or worse than combustible cigarettes. And last but not least, the censorship that the vaping communities, that the user suffers in our media. Difficulties, well, lack of informed choices and the black market. As I said before, most of the countries, they have either a prohibition or lack of regulation. So the only way people have in Latin America to switch to a better alternative is go to the black market, which leads to lack of quality controls and product standards. And as I said before, that's what really puts population at risk, because they do not know what they are using, which are the ingredients that the product has, which are the levels of nicotine that they have. So that's really complicated. And the lack of selling expertise or knowledge poor, or the lack of seller advice. Since these alternatives are not legally available, many of the people who sell these devices, they are not 100% aware of which are the difference between one and the other. They are not in the right spot to provide the proper advice to the one who's willing to switch, and to help that people switching to make the proper transition to these less harmful alternatives. And, well, regarding other barriers, something that we see in our region is the PAHO influence on public health policies and the coercion that PAHO exerts with the MOH. Legal challenge to small and medium companies. Small and medium companies are totally unprotected in Latin America. Regulatory and tax uncertainty, since these products are not legally available. The regulatory framework and taxes is totally, it's the Wild West. And the criminal control, the criminal cartels taking over the market and controlling the market. So that's the scenario in Latin America.
Thank you. Very interesting. Okay, Sud, you're up.
I'm going to hand the mic to Rebecca from Uganda. She's a KAC scholar, and it'll be right for her to represent what might be the issues among women in tobacco.
Thank you. We're dealing about the barriers and about women. So ours is really so brief because mostly it takes men. We looked at the weight management issue because us as women, we believe one who smokes as a woman believes when she smokes, she helps, it will reduce on her appetite on feeding. So she would really get scared if she sees that she reduces on the amount of nicotine taking in, she will eventually gain weight. Then that we didn't talk about the distance. That one was under the doubt. Okay. Then the difficulties. The difficulties, one, we looked at the cost. The cost of maybe we are switching from tobacco to the safer nicotine products. When you, for my case in Uganda, or Africa, really these snus and the vapes tend to be costly than the cigarette itself. For example, you can get one vape, and if you tend to buy the cigarettes, you'll be 100 and something cigarettes. So us as those women will definitely find it comfortable to purchase the cigarette, which is combustible. Then the stigma you tend to find that when you get to smoke, so you hide in. He talked about when life is bad, you get to hide your negative energy in smoking, so it puts down your anxiety. Yeah, that one also comes to the pregnant women. Pregnant women really sometimes the first, second trimester, if you want to manage the nausea. So when one puts in the nicotine, it tries to help them manage the nausea and they don't begin bringing out the vomiting or what. And even in the third trimester, the last trimester, when you're so anxious, will I give birth? Will I do what? How is it going to happen? So it is a way of managing the anxiety. We talked about discretion. Please, can you? Okay. Then for the other barriers, women really look at vaping for a main thing, because when I've seen people vape around, it's not really on a bad sense, but when one vapes, brings out a big smoke. So as me, a woman, I am sensible. So if I bring out that big smoke, I'm like, wow, everyone is going to look at me. But then when I smoke, that person who smoke, it is only a small amount of smoke that comes in, and we are so sensitive about our environment and the people around us. Thank you. I hope I'm so clear.
Thank you. Okay, last group. Thank you.
Thanks. So we did health comorbidities, and first, just in terms of definitions, who we were talking about were people who are experiencing COPD, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, also to some extent use disorders, cannabis, alcohol, opioid. The population trends to be older, and a lot of the information that they get is coming in through their healthcare providers or social workers, and so that's also kind of part of the who. In terms of which products we chose to include, heated tobacco and oral, as well as vape products, because there is increasing use of these different choices. In terms of why and how, we asked everyone to do a pie chart of ranking of what is the relative impact of doubt, difficulty, distance, and dilutes. And so we ranked them that doubt was by far the greatest impact. We had it at about 57% of the pie. And there's misunderstanding both of the risk associated with continuing to smoke in this population. You figure, hey, I'm already 60 years old and it hasn't gotten me yet, as well as the benefit that still exists in switching at that age. And there's certainly a ton of misinformation about the negative effects of products, as well as misunderstanding of the actual efficacy, particularly within the healthcare community. It's not really part of the paradigm. The next issue was the vaping experience. And so, cigarettes have been used for decades. The heated tobacco products are probably the closest in terms of experience, but in the US, they haven't really been part of the landscape because of patent issues, although that may be changing. We've certainly seen in Japan that there is an opportunity there. And part of it too is there's not really an understanding or a place for the dual use journey. And so the reality is that whether you're using NRT or you're using the substitute products, there are some situations and use cases in which you're going to use a cigarette, and over time you're going to feel more comfortable with alternative products and use them more. But it's not really there's not really an understanding of that journey. And likewise, you know, outside the U.S., the strength of these products is limited. And in terms of vaping being too different, you know, in terms of the, you know, cannabis using population, very often you might use it in a blunt. And so, you know, you'd be expected to smoke it, although vaping is becoming more prevalent with cannabis use. And, you know, heated tobacco products are, you know, becoming more similar. And then the last thing is variety of choices. On the one hand, there are more choices coming on the market, but on the other hand, there's more prohibition, flavors are going away, and there's more of an illicit market. So, you know, these topics have been brought up by several other groups. But that was overall how we saw the market. There's a lot of, or this area, there's a lot of opportunity, and also a lot of challenges, and primarily a lot of misinformation and not an understanding of the right role of these products in this community.
Thank you. So because we had so many people come, which is fantastic, we're sort of running out of time, and there was still the facilitators sheet to do. So some people have to go at 11, and so we can quickly throw the facilitators up. You can have a go at that, and then we probably won't get to hear back, but we would love to hear any ideas you have on the facilitators to switching among your groups. Would you be willing to just quickly sort of throw some things up on the facilitators sheet? And we will do up a summary and hand it out at the end of the conference, so you'll get this fed back to you. Would that be okay? All right, get up there and write on the facilitators to switching for the group that you are talking about, please. And we'll just do that for the last 14 minutes, and then we'll let you go. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. I just want to use the last few minutes to thank Judy. Thank you very much for coming and helping to co-facilitate this workshop. Tomás, where are you? Where is he? Thank you so much for coming to help co-facilitate this workshop. A little gift for you. And then as you all leave, you will also receive a little gift from New Zealand. You know what this is? You know what New Zealand's about? The All Blacks beat all of your countries all the time in rugby. Rugby. So we have a little rugby ball for you. It's a stress ball because this work is very, very stressful, right? You need a stress ball. And you are now Team Tobacco Harm Reduction. All right. So Steve has those as you leave the room. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your knowledge. We'll summarize it and get a summary back out to everyone before the end of the conference. Thank you.